Oh, good.
Oh, good. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We are now live and we are talking about an interesting topic because, one, we are gearing up for our next round of awareness school, which starts 2 weeks from tomorrow, January 23rd. And something that came up a lot in our last round of awareness school, and it just seems to be a topic that is a big deal for people, is dealing with what is referred to as narcissistic family members. So that's what we wanted to unpack today. We fielded some questions, so we'll be covering that. You're welcome to add questions as we go along. But I guess to start off, the whole, clinical diagnosis of narcissism isn't really what we're dealing with here. What we want to talk about, it's patterns. We don't want to talk about people. We want to talk about patterns. And that's really what awareness school is all about. Recognizing patterns in yourself, recognizing patterns in other people. And there are patterns that people engage in that are then referred to as narcissistic. And that's what we want to talk about, how to deal with those patterns in other people, how to deal with those patterns. Someone asked a great question, and this is something I have experience with. If you've been raised in a certain way and you're seeing, you are exhibiting these behaviors, you are doing the things that people call narcissistic. So, how to recognize it, what to do about it, how to navigate relationships, how to co-parent, things like that is what we'll get into today.
Yeah. So, and the kind of the idea for the format of this video came up as a result, like you said, of a little switch up that happened in the previous awareness school, class 4, where instead of just coming right out and teaching all the principles that are already kind of present in the course and that people are kind of learning on their own time, we decided to have it be more interactive and actually have people bring up more. And we always kind of wanted that, but this time it just really clicked, and we had great participants. And people were bringing their problems forward, and then we were kind of applying the principles to their problems, or showing them, kind of demoing how they might apply those principles to their situation. And one of the themes that kept coming up was the issue of, I have a narcissistic mother, I have a narcissistic parent. Is pretty much mostly that, right? But people were struggling with that, and so, as you said, I don't consider myself like a narcissism expert. So there's like separate brackets of quotes around each of those words. My thing that I do is that I help people who come to me deal with the problems that they're dealing with, take them apart, put them back together again, fix them. Now, I would say here, there are sometimes two different sets of problems that a person's dealing with. Sometimes a person is dealing with a problem that is a person who is demonstrating what much of the world refers to as narcissistic tendencies, narcissistic patterns. You might say that person is a narcissist, or they have narcissistic personality disorder, whatever. A person has a problem with somebody because of the way that they think, feel, and act, right? On the other hand, another problem that people can have, and these are not mutually exclusive, is a person can interact with the concepts associated with narcissism in ways that are less than resourceful for them, in ways that are disempowering, in ways that interfere with their ability to have either constructive interactions with a person, or interfere with their ability to choose not to have interactions with that person at all. So, kind of what we're trying to do is sort of whole person people helping here. And I think the other thing too that's really important is, even if you and someone else in this video has a problem and it's a narcissistic family member, that's the same concept, right? But the experiential realities that each of you are dealing with may be very different. The interpersonal dynamics that you're dealing with may be very different. Even if some of the interpersonal dynamics are the same, there's gaslighting in both cases, for instance, and we can discuss that later. Even if some of the interpersonal dynamics are the same, it's likely that your individual experiences will be different. And even if your experiences are the same, it's very likely that the solutions that will get you both to where you most want to be will be different, right? The ideas that it will take to get you to be able to make sense out of doing what is right and resourceful for you, rather than perhaps considering the feelings of someone else when doing that actually is a trap, or doing that as an elaborate strategy that your mind uses to get you to make sense out of not doing something that will serve you, or out of continuing to do something that obviously doesn't serve you. We really have to pick those things apart at the individual basis. And that's where, for me, these conversations ultimately come down to you and how you're thinking, the assumptions that are present in your mind, the feelings that those assumptions are creating inside you, the ways in which those feelings are manifesting as behaviors. how you're interacting with that person, the fact that you're interacting with that person, how you react when that person behaves in a way that makes you feel some kind of way you don't want to feel. I mean, do you have to be able to explain to them how you feel in order to act upon the feeling, I don't want to be around you? Do you have to get them to go, you're right to not want to be around me, before you can feel okay about not doing that? Do you have a choice to express yourself if that's what you want to do? Or if you know that it's going to be fruitless and frustrating for you, do you have the kind of self possession that allows you just to extricate yourself from that situation without having to justify or explain to anybody why you're choosing to do what you're choosing to do? So, it's not like a right or wrong thing, but this is just kind of where we're coming from this particular topic. There's a lot of people that have a lot of very rigid, defined ideas in this area. And I'm not really interested in contesting conceptual space or fighting over what's true or what the right mechanism is. That's just not my thing. I'm interested in helping people with whom this message resonates, to take it and actually adapt it, kind of create, because we get these patterns that are pretty nice and useful. But sometimes you and I have to work together to fashion little adapters that let you hook these ideas up to your specific situation, so that you don't just understand it intellectually, because most everyone here probably already understands a lot of this stuff intellectually. And if you don't, by the end of this video or after a call or something, you probably would. But there's a difference in understanding it intellectually and getting that intellectual understanding to kind of penetrate down into the part of you that generates your feelings, so that it means something, that you know what the right thing to do is, so that knowing what the right resourceful thing to do for you means that it's time to do it. And you get to feel confident, and you get to feel secure, and you get to not feel guilty about doing it. And you don't ask yourself questions that make you feel bad, like, oh, well, how will they feel about it? When you figure out what's really unhealthy for you, and when you figure out that you don't want to continue doing something, at no point in that process does your mind need to generate a question. It goes, but how are they going to feel about it? There are useful times to ask yourself that question and not useful times to ask yourself that question. And when it comes time to either demand relationship change, or when it comes time to simply make a unilateral decision to remove yourself from that relationship, that is not an appropriate time to stop and say, well, how are they going to feel about my choice to do this? It's not relevant how they're going to feel. They're responsible for managing their experience of doing what you have concluded you need to do for your mental health, for your spiritual well-being, for your life, and how you're going to spend it. So a little bit of a big preamble there, but I think it's important because a lot of people bring a lot of ideas into conversations about like narcissism and family members and stuff. And it's useful just to get clear on like where I'm coming from. I think probably where we're coming from, not so that you can agree with us, but so that you can kind of understand this is kind of what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah. And that's like where the awareness school and just this work, it allows you to get that distance, so for most of your life, you're just in the experience dealing with people who, those are adaptive patterns. Being a quote narcissist is an adaptive pattern that person developed to survive in their world. So it all makes sense. What they're doing makes sense. Your reactions to what they're doing make sense. But this whole process is about taking your mind off of autopilot, taking it off of just this robotic, this is how I'm supposed to react, this is how I'm supposed to behave, this is what they expect of me, this is what they programmed into me to feel in response to them. And you have to know, oh, this feeling, this sensation, this guilt, this this feeling like, oh, I have to call them, I have to tell them what I'm doing, I have to explain myself to them. That's part of this programming. Isn't that interesting? And them being mad about it is part of their programming. And that's the thing. It's in so much of this work, it's about trying to become a real person. That's really my trying to have a real person, be a real person and have a relationship with another real person. So like the problems that we have in a relationship, it's not like it's pattern to pattern. It's these patterns, and they, we have all of these agendas, all of these intrapersonal contracts we've signed about how we interact with people, and interpersonal contracts we've signed that we don't know what the fine print says. This is about discovering what's the fine print. What have I consented to? What does this idea imply? What does this mean about me that you are saying what you're saying or doing what you're doing, or that my parent or friend or cousin or whatever is interacting with me in this way? And it's just slowing down and being so much more curious about this whole phenomenon called a relationship, and what I think is supposed to happen, what I think isn't supposed to happen. So, and what we do in awareness school is give you a framework for understanding a way of looking at how these things occur within you. And the more that you understand it and the less you're in it, the more you see it for what it is, the more you see clearly, you are better able to interact, better able to engage. You're less triggered, you're less emotional about it. You are responding more from a place of calm curiosity rather than reactive, high tension, high emotional states, which is what most people operate from. So it just gives you that ability to see it, to slow down, and to have different ways of engaging. Because when you grow up in a family, there's certain ways that you respond. There's certain games that you play. When he or she throws the tennis ball and hits it over to you, they expect you to return it in a certain manner. And when you stop playing games and you start being really interested in how you are inclined to respond and how they are responding to your response, and you're just like, this is all so fascinating, you become a different person. Your life takes on a different tone. It takes on a different reality. You're able to see things as they are rather than through just all the layers and the muck that you've been, conditioned to see the world in.
Mm-hmm. Anything we'll look at before we get into the questions?
No, I think we can jump in.
So what we're going to do now is kind of run through some messages that people send us in response to an announcement. We're going to do this, and we'll kind of I think it's a very good big picture overview. Now what we're going to do, if that's kind of abstract and you're kind of I think I maybe understand what they're saying, but not really, we're going to go through some specific issues and kind of deal just what comes up from our perspective, and that'll kind of give you a sense for how this stuff might be applied. So the first person asked, I think, quite a good question. When boundaries are not respected, what to do? Cut off contact? That doesn't seem like a good solution to me. Okay, so I said it's a good question, and I did. It's a very revealing question because and I don't know who this person is. I don't know what their situation is, but you do this stuff for a while, certain kind of intuitive capacities start to kind of click on. And what I'm hearing here are certain assumptions that I think are active in this person's mind. Can you kind of hear the rock in a hard place experience that this person seems to be having? They got a tough situation here. Somebody isn't respecting their boundaries, right? What do I do? Do I have to cut off contact? That doesn't seem like a good solution to me. So this person, sounds like they're experiencing themselves as being stuck between either subjecting themselves to and tolerating what they consider to be unacceptable behavior from someone, right? That's one option. Or they have to do something that they consider somewhat unacceptable, which is cut that person off. Do I tolerate unacceptable or accept unacceptable behavior? Or do I do the unacceptable thing of cutting that person off? That's a double bind kind of situation. And in general, anytime I feel as though I'm stuck in some kind of a double bind, I want to consider the possibility that it is not reality I'm not stuck between two immovable aspects of reality. I'm stuck between two or more unresourceful assumptions that are not serving me. So let's just kind of move into this practically. The first thing I'd want to know to get more specific is exactly what kind of boundary violations are we talking about here? People not minding their own, because it does vary quite a bit in the way that it's manifesting, how I'm going to deal with it in that specific situation. In general, what I would do though, I would observe myself as I go into interactions with this person. I would observe what happens what is the thing that they do that I consider a boundary violation? How do I feel inside? I feel offended. I feel like I want to stick up for myself. I say, you're doing that thing I don't want to do. Do I feel angry but also afraid to express it because I'm worried about how they might react if I stand up for myself? I would observe that entire process. And I would observe, does the thought occur to me, I don't know if I even want to interact with this person anymore. Every time I interact with them, I get stressed out. I get exhausted. I end up feeling angry. I end up being in a bad mood for the rest of the day. It affects my relationship with my husband or with my kids or with whoever else I'm hanging out with. I don't want to be around this person anymore. And that realization leads immediately to something that goes, oh, well, you can't cut your family off. Oh, that wouldn't be a right thing to do. You've got to figure out. And I would observe how that little voice in your head, that assumption has got you over a barrel. Because that person that's manipulating you and that's violating boundaries, they don't have a little voice in their head that says, well, you have to be nice to her because she's a family member of yours. They have a little voice in their head that goes, you can treat her however you want because she's got a voice in her head that says she has to have a relationship with you. I would step back and I would see that voice and I would say that voice is a liability. That voice is constraining my ability to really step forward and negotiate in a hard-nosed manner with this other person and to hammer out a manner of interacting that will be acceptable to me. I have a liability, which is that I'm not willing to walk away from this relationship. And it is keeping me from having the courage to refuse to do what doesn't serve me or to insist on doing what would serve me or what would, the thing that's going to serve me. Just watch that. And for me, I watch that and I have to acknowledge to myself, That's a me problem. The fact that it's not psychologically viable to walk out of this relationship or to simply not continue interacting with this person, that is a me issue. That's a me setting. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's a setting inside me that I could change and that only I am responsible for changing. And one of the things that I would just put out there is that having the willingness to not interact with someone, regardless of who they are, if those interactions are consistently not good for you and consistently leaving you worse off than you would be if you didn't have them at all, being willing to cut those relationships off is not only useful for actually cutting those relationships off. Very often, being willing to walk away from a relationship is useful because it puts you in a position of power when you go to the negotiation table, so that you know that if we can't work out a mutually acceptable solution to this issue, which is that you and I can enter into a contract of interpersonal interaction that we both can agree is okay, and that we can deal with abrogations of that contract, which say when someone violates it and doesn't do what they're supposed to, we will deal with that when those situations arise. The ability to do that maximizes the chances that you'll be able to create an actually real and fulfilling relationship with that person, where you don't resent them, where you don't secretly hate them, where you don't wish that you didn't have to talk to them, where you don't feel like you're only interacting with them because you're afraid of what your conscience will do to you if you don't, so on and so forth. And so many are the blessings and the rewards to the person who does the work necessary to become unwilling to do anything that doesn't serve her, and to become unwilling to fail to do anything that does serve her. The thing that you, very often, my unwillingness to do the thing that I'm afraid to do is the thing that makes me have to keep being afraid to do it, right? My unwillingness to leave the relationship very often contributes to keeping the relationship in a way that makes me kind of wish I could leave the relationship. And if I can purge myself of that unwillingness, this is the thing, is that we help people get to the point where they go, hell or high water, come what may. I am going to get better at recognizing what serves me and recognizing what doesn't serve me. I'm going to become more willing and more determined to do what serves me and to abstain from doing what doesn't serve me. And I don't have any prerequisites or preconditions set on that. It's not I'm going to do what serves me unless that creates an uncomfortable situation with my relationship with my mother. It's not that. I won't do what doesn't serve me. And I'm prepared to sign on to that. As soon as I recognize that something I'm doing isn't serving me, my project becomes making sense out of no longer doing that thing anymore. There's no asterisks. There is no see the fine print to say unless your mom really doesn't like it, or unless someone gets their feelings hurt, or unless somebody misinterprets it, or unless somebody doesn't understand, or unless it puts stress on the family, or unless it's inconvenient for some third party. It's nothing to do with any of that. I won't continue. Now, on the other hand, you don't have to do that. But if you have within you certain criteria for persisting in relationships that are not in your best interest, that do not serve you, that leave you worse off emotionally than you would be if you weren't in them, that's your responsibility. That's the thing you're carrying around inside you, and you're going to bear the consequences of the behaviors that you do and do not engage in as a result of having that criteria inside. My thing is not telling you what you should and shouldn't do and shouldn't have for criteria. I want to help you become more and more aware of the assumptions under which you're operating, so that you, as an individual, get to observe yourself as you operate under the influences of those assumptions. And then you, as an individual, get to make progressively more conscious choices about what you're going to continue to do, what you're going to maybe stop doing, And so hopefully that's useful. I try to be as helpful as I can. Sometimes it's a little tough without all the details, and I know for you it would be tough to provide all the details, but there's some general reference points that hopefully you'll find useful.
Yes. And so a personal example that I tend to give when we're talking about awareness school, because this is like really what got us down this path, was a point in our relationship where Steve started recognizing certain patterns within me that I was engaging in, that at the time I just felt like this is the way that I am. I am this way. I am crazy. I have patterns. This is who I am, was how I experienced it. And, he came to me and was like, hey, listen, I really like you. I think you're great. I think, we have a great thing going on here, but I'm not interested in having a lifestyle of fighting all the time, or, the certain things that I was doing in the relationship. And his willingness to leave, like the fact that he didn't just stay and was like, I'm with you and I'm just gonna that was my experience of relationships, is like, you're with a person and they've got issues. They have issues, they have problems, they have ways of being, and that's just who they are, and you love that person, and so you stay with that person hell or high water. Doesn't matter what they do, you love them, and it's, you fight and you have these problems, but you come back together. And that was like my model for a relationship, that it's like, it doesn't matter how bad it is, it doesn't matter how I behave, this is just me, this is just who I am. And so his willingness, to leave the relationship, to say, hey, I think we've got a really great thing going on here, but I'm not interested in these patterns. That was the biggest wake up call. That is the only thing that got me down this journey of actually looking at my behavior, looking at how I perceive what you say, how I think about, what you do, and how I think about what I do. And all of this inner work for me started with someone saying, hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave because, I value my own experience, and I'm not enjoying the interactions that I'm having with you. So, that's just how it is. And so for me, it was like, wow, I got work to do. I have work to do, and I value this relationship enough to do that work. And, I'm still doing that work, and it's an ongoing relationship with myself of becoming more and more and more and more aware, and less and less willing to operate under unconscious patterns of fighting, of, just interpersonal disharmony, of all of the things that were creating those problems. But he had to be willing to leave for me to even see it. Like, if you wouldn't have been willing to leave, then I had no incentive to change any of those behaviors, to actually look, because this work is not easy. It is not easy to look in the mirror, to really look at what you're doing when you're in the midst of a pattern. It's like the hardest thing in the world, and nobody wants to do it. But when you don't leave, when you don't like step away from that relationship because you're afraid of how that person's going to feel, it doesn't give them that opportunity to actually do the inner work, to look at their patterns, to make those changes in order to have a harmonious relationship. So it's the best thing ever from me, from my perspective, that you were willing to leave the relationship, because otherwise I wouldn't have woken up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that you're allowed to have certain things that you insist on in a relationship, and certain things like you're not willing to participate in kind of an ongoing manner. It doesn't matter if it's excuse me, in a romantic relationship or some other kind. And there's truly nothing personal about it. I'm not willing to interact with a person who's going to have a certain number of fights with me, no matter what happens. And that you spend enough time with a person, you can start to get a sense for, okay, we're having a fight because you were super stressed this day. We're having a fight because I made a mistake. We're having a fight because, we just were on the right. Sometimes things do happen. Fights occur, disagreements happen. That's fine. It's a natural part of living. It doesn't even have to be unpleasant. I think we now have what you'd call fights that aren't even unpleasant anymore. I would say they're like disagreements. And it's very interesting. It's about the same stuff very often, little minor things, whatever. But because there isn't in this relationship a person or people who require a certain amount of drama, right? That drama's not there. That unpleasantness isn't there. The discord isn't there. Even though the disagreements are there, even though the contentiousness sometimes is present, no one has a bad time. And so you get to, you don't have to sign contracts that are unconscionable just because you love the person on the other end of the contract. You as an individual get to decide what kind of patterns of interpersonal interaction you are willing to subject yourself to. And you don't have to say, if it were anyone but my mother, but my sister, but my father, but my child, I wouldn't put up with this. You don't have to say that. You are at liberty to say that, right? But if you choose to do that, you recognize that that's your choice, that's your decision. You're responsible for the consequences of making that decision. And then within the context of that, you can certainly then maximize the quality of things you're dealing with. But you got to get rid of this thing that makes you feel guilty, because you as a person, a sovereign, conscious entity and awareness, right? You, an individual human being, have certain things that you just don't want to have to deal with in your life. I don't want to have to deal with constant complaining. I don't want to have to deal with a person who finds fault with everything I do. I don't want to have to deal with a person who thinks that the choices that I make are somehow their business, right? I don't want to have to deal with that I hear negative opinions from this person. I, as a human being, get to decide whether I want to have that in my life or not. And if it was really fun, I can go through and I can prune away every belief and every assumption that makes me feel guilty about acting in my own best interest in that situation. Because you'll notice very often that these people who will kick and scream and blame and cry and lament and assume a victim posture because you stood up for yourself and stopped putting up with their nonsense, Did they make a huge effort to change their behavior? They didn't. Very often, they really didn't. They were perfectly happy to behave in ways that made you miserable, right? And they assumed the victim posture the moment that you begin to opt out of that relationship and start doing what was right for you. They act as if they can. There's this thing where a lot of times where people expect you to be infinitely accommodating of the way they happen to be at a given moment in time. They think, and this is this kind of, this is kind of the narcissistic thing, right? That somewhere in the back of their mind is this unconscious assumption that because you're their child, it is your job to accommodate whatever way it is that they happen to be. And here's another thing to watch out for. People who seem to be under the impression that you are responsible for the way that they feel as a result of the things that their behavior causes you to want to do. Like, for instance, not have very much to do with them. So let's say you and I are in some kind of a relationship. I behave in a way that makes you want to have nothing to do with me. Maybe that's happening right now. And then you say, listen, I don't want to interact with you anymore. Or perhaps you just stop interacting with me. And then I get a bad feeling inside. I try to blame you for the fact that there's a bad feeling in me in response to you not wanting to interact with me in response to a bunch of things about the way that I am. Now, that suffering that I'm feeling might be real, but guess what? It's my responsibility and it's coming from me. How is it coming from me? Well, let me count the ways. First of all, I'm responsible for the fact that I behaved in a way that caused you to want to have nothing to do with me. I'm responsible for that. Second of all, once you reach the point of no longer wanting to interact with me, I had to make that decision on your part mean things. I had to believe things about it. What does it mean about me? What does it mean about them? What does it mean about the future? I had to focus on what I didn't want. I had to play up and stoke the fires of victimhood. I had to watch this because this happens. I stoked the fires of victimization and suffering within myself because in my mind, my suffering constitutes a body of evidence that what you did is bad and wrong. I have a psychological incentive to have as terrible a time of you wanting nothing to do with me as I can, because the more I suffer, the more evidence I feel I have that I'm the victim, you're the perpetrator, you're a bad person. I talk to my friends, I talk to fellow family members, I talk to anybody who will listen about how sad I am that you won't talk to me and how awful it is that you won't talk to me and about how much I'm suffering. You have to be able to observe what's going on here. People will inflict suffering upon themselves because in their mind that suffering is evidence to them that they're the good person and you're the bad person. Now, if they want to play that game, that is their business. I would not waste a breath trying to persuade them not to play that game. I would recognize that my business in life, my obligation to myself is to learn how to not be emotionally affected by their decision to play that game. Every attempt to extricate people with whom you are involved in a familial capacity from these patterns, you have to know is you participating in those patterns. Now, I'm not telling you to not try to extricate them from it. I'm just saying, remember what I said to you and keep what I said to you in mind as you try to pull them out of that pattern and as you try in vain and as you suffer and as you keep finding yourself back in that doldrum place that you said you didn't want to go back to anymore. And every time you do, just keep in mind, somebody said to me, when I try to help them instead of helping myself, what I am doing, here's a principle. Every attempt to assume responsibility for that for which I am not, every attempt to assume responsibility for that for which I am not responsible is a secret attempt on my part to evade responsibility for something for which I am responsible. I'm responsible for identifying and adopting what's resourceful and right for me, right? So if I say to myself, what's right for me? Not continuing this relationship. And then I go, oh, but I don't want to make them feel, well, what am I doing? I'm assuming responsibility for somebody else's feelings. Is that a nice thing to do? No, that's me using a strategy to avoid accepting responsibility for doing what I'm actually responsible for, which is taking care of myself, which I don't have the courage to do, or I'm afraid of how guilty I'm going to feel. And so what I do is I go over here and tend to somebody else's needs. How might that person make themselves feel if I choose to do what's right for me? Oh, I guess I can't do it. And secretly, what I'm like a kid who's relieved to be sick because he had an exam he knew he couldn't pass that day. Check inside yourself. Discover the deceptive capacity that you have in you. It's a route to personal freedom. Because a lot of times we'll blame that narcissist and we'll say that person, they're just so manipulative, right? But secretly, I love putting them first because it gives me an excuse to not assume the burden and the yoke of responsibility that comes with putting myself first. There is this strange way in which these patterns penetrate us and influence our behavior and incentivize us to participate in the very interactions that we complain about and want to be free from. Now, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just a part of this process. Pulling yourself out of this stuff is multi-layered, and it requires some real mind-bending discoveries at times. But this is just some of the stuff we've seen.
Someone asked, how did you decide that it wasn't up to him to change his own experience?
With regard to the relationship?
Yeah.
Well, so my thing was, okay, you and I are interacting in a certain way. The thing, and this is, I think, the way I described it, and you can, tell me if this is kind of how you experience it too. I said, it seems like there's a certain amount of fighting you're going to do with me one way or another. It seems like there's a certain amount of kind of ritualistic discord that is going to occur in this relationship, or that you need or expect to, or are going to cause to occur in this relationship. It seems to me, I didn't say that's the way it was, but I came to her as a half partner in that relationship. And because one of two things is true: either my perception of what's going on is accurate, right? In which case we need to do something about it, right? Or my perception of what's going on is not accurate. She's not actually instigating fights out of nowhere, but I'm seeing her as doing that. And that needs to be addressed. She might have information that I don't have access to. She might tell me something that makes me go, oh, I was convinced that my interpretation of what was going on was right. But now when you put it that way, that's a factor I hadn't considered. I had not observed the prism from that particular line of sight. My experience of the situation is now completely different. Let me now go through a week, 2 weeks, whatever, with that idea in mind and see how I feel. And so the thing for me was, I'm responsible for the decisions and the choices that I make. If I choose to remain in a relationship with a person, I'm responsible for the consequences of that choice. If I choose to continue interacting with that person, having decided to continue being in a relationship with that person, that's my choice. What I was finding and what I was perceiving and what it seemed to me to be the case was that I was with a person who had a sort of a pre-existing commitment to a certain amount of drama and discord, right? And when I had that awareness in me, and I'm not saying an awareness that was the way she was, I had this awareness. It seems like there's a pattern going on here. The choice that I made in that situation was to bring that information to her and to say, it seems like this is going on for you. It seems like this is part of what's happening in this relationship with us. And if that's what's going on, I want you to know I'm not like cool with that. I'm not willing to do that. That's not something I kind of have grown up around a certain amount of that kind of thing. I don't want my life to be characterized by a certain amount of ritualistic arguments about things. Now, I'm not saying it's bad or wrong. I'm not saying you have to change. I'm just saying I'm starting to form an impression about what's going on here. And that impression is that this is the case. And I, just for the record, want you to know that I'm not okay with that. And I was interested to hear what she had to say. I'm interested to know, to what extent is that consistent with your experience? If it's consistent with your experience, what do you want to do with it moving forward? If it seems like it's true. If it's not consistent with your experience, what's your perspective on it? Tell me what you think about that, right? And then I'll respond to that, because I'm trying to create a shared reality with this person. I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to find really, I'm looking out for a path to peace and happiness for me. And my hope is that that path involves being with this person, right? If it doesn't, I'm okay with that in a general sense. I understand sometimes people get together and sometimes they come apart. And there's have to be something wrong with one of the people in order for the relationship to evolve out of existence, right? But I wanted to be able to share that perspective with her, either have that perspective modify her understanding, or maybe she could then say something in response to my sharing my perspective that would modify mine. So people, especially kind of like new age stuff, sometimes people can get too sucked into that I'm responsible for my experience thing. And what they end up doing is they say, well, I'm responsible for my experience. And what that means is that I can never bring an issue to my partner to discuss. And as far as I can tell, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. I can come and I can say, hey, it seems like something's going on with us. What do you think about this? Without saying, Melissa, I'm feeling bad 30% of the week, and I think it's your fault, right? Because my thing is like, look, I am always responsible for my experience of the other person, right? I'm responsible for the fact that I'm having an experience of that other person. I'm choosing to live in a home with this person. I'm choosing to be in a relationship with this person. So at the end of the day, let's say that, my partner's twice as bad as I ever thought they were. At the end of the day, where does the buck stop, right? Harry Truman had a little plaque on his desk that the buck stops here. At the end of the day, who is it who decided to be with that person? It was me. So at the end of the day, even if my worst assessment of them is true, could I make a change within myself that would make how bad they are not a problem for me? Which is to say, yeah, I could change things that are causing me to be in a relationship with a person who's as bad as I think they are, right? So I can accept that full responsibility without having to enter into some kind of weird solipsistic two ships passing in the night thing where I'm never able to come forward and talk to the other person. Does that make sense?
Totally. Absolutely.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good question, and it is, and I think a lot of like what the work that we do consists of. Listen, I think this topic of like personal responsibility is a very good thing. Does that mean that there's no place for interpersonal negotiation? And it's like, no, I don't think it is. I think that you're 100% responsible for your stuff. I'm 100% responsible for mine. Let's see if we can get together and make concessions that are mutually acceptable that will help us have a better time together.
Totally. Someone says, when they say they don't remember what they did or say and feels upset at you for their behavior. Like when a person, like they claim they don't remember.
What do you think about it?
Well, looking at my own experience of, not remembering, because that's the thing is, there have been times, which is just crazy, just being on the end of a person who says or does something, the capacity to black out and to not be able to acknowledge and see the harm that you're inflicting, of the way in which you're treating someone, because it's difficult to look at that. Like they can't see it from within the experience of, I'm right, you're wrong, you're hurting me, what I did made sense. The justification machine that like just turns on for excusing and obfuscating and creating this completely, they have a distorted picture of reality. And having been on the side of being a person with a distorted picture of reality, it really feels like you're the mean one. You are, and trying to get that person to see is very, very difficult. And especially if you don't have their cooperation. That's the thing in our relationship, is there would be times where like some pattern would turn on within me where I'm in this mode of just creating problems, saying things, forgetting things, like whipping up this whole thing. And Steve's very patient and sits and shows me. And that's been, one of the most educational things of my life, but also, again, the most excruciating, is to see it, but to be, again, so interested in maintaining this harmony, being able to see this pattern for what it is. But if you have a person who's not interested in seeing the role that they're playing, like, I have to be willing to see the role that I'm playing in it in order to have any success in actually seeing it. Otherwise, you're talking past, you are living in different realities. You're talking past one another. Everyone's trying to not be blamed. That's the big thing, is I just can't be blamed. It can't be my fault. And so that's really, really difficult when a person is like, I don't remember doing that. I don't remember saying that. I see that you see that I said that, or that's your experience of it. And so they feel like they're doing the right thing, or that, you need to take responsibility for what you're seeing. So it gets really, really messy, especially if a person learns a couple of things about psychology and they feel like you're the it's like, it's kind of crazy. And that's where, having your bearings and having your footing in awareness and knowing, and that's the thing, is Steve has really good record keeping mentally of like what would happen in these interactions. And, in order to see it, you almost do need a tape recording of what happened in order for that person to actually own up or be able to see how what they said or did affected you. And especially when there's like these layered communication, layers of manipulation. Well, all I said was this, but that doesn't include like the subtext of what they said, and the deep structure of what they said, and how it was conveyed. And so that, again, you're dealing with when a person is not remembering, not willing to see or even be interested. That's one of the things that Steve would do that would really help me to see these patterns in myself, is like, aren't you even interested in the fact that I feel the way that I feel about what you did? And that really gave me, like, I had to pause and think. It's like, I am interested in how you feel, but that pattern it wants to shut it down. It wants to see you as the problem. It wants to not see this at all. It wants to say, well, you did this, and to laugh and to mock and to be, it's like and then to actually wonder, wow, I'm curious about the person I love, the person I care about, and, if it's a parent-child relationship, I'm really interested in the fact that you're seeing me in this way, or that you experienced me in this way, rather than just being combative about it. Are they even remotely interested in the fact that you feel the way you do? And if they aren't, again, you can't get them out of it. They have to want out of it. I had to want out of these patterns. I had to want to see what it was that I was doing in order to have any success in it at all. So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, and interest, like genuine interest in the fact, it's so easy to get sucked into the emotional outrage of being treated a certain way, or whatever. That isn't usually productive, because it just, the enemy of these patterns is calm, cool, collected awareness of exactly what is going on, because that's what's going to give you the confidence necessary to insist upon your rights, and if those rights aren't going to be respected, it's going to give you the courage to just simply opt out of the interaction altogether. Any kind of emotional explosion, and sometimes in the very beginning, if it's the first time you stand up for yourself and you really just kind of let them have it, that's, even if it's not maximally resourceful, it's natural, it's probably inevitable, it's fine. But moving forward, though, your best friend is intense curiosity, because that person, superficially, the narcissist wants your compliance, right? They want you to do exactly what they want you to do. But at a deeper level, they can function and thrive very well when you go from comply to finally outrageous rebellion. How dare you? They can use that too, because the confusion and the upheaval that creates provides a beautiful smoke screen and cover for them to slip away. They can go, well, see, we all made mistakes, and they can say, well, see, I think tempers got out of hand, and maybe it's true, tempers did get out of hand, but tempers got out of hand after 45 minutes of them manipulating you, or intentionally, not necessarily consciously, but intentionally leading something in a crazy direction or something like that. And so, when we would have, and this is how it goes. There's your experience and your perception of what's true. There's their experience and their perception of what's true, right? And then in between the two of you, there's the interpersonal no man's land, right? And a lot of the times what happens is one person will insist that you accept their perception and experience of what's true. And they'll do it by coercion, they'll do it by intimidation, they will have kind of looming over you. Listen, they don't come right out and say this, but from past experience, how hard I'm going to make this for you if you don't accept or pretend to accept my version of events. You might be right, but let me tell you something. It doesn't matter that you're right, because I am up in my fortress of unawareness and obliviousness. I've got food for 9 months up here. You can siege me with reason and insight and reality all you want. I will not come down until you acquiesce, until you back up, until you give up, right? And so a lot of the times the other person, just by sheer exhaustion, says, fine, that's the way mother is. Fine, that's the way my husband is. That's the way, fine, I give up, right? Or they get so incensed and enraged, they go, you know what, God damn it, I'm going to pull you out of that castle dead or alive. I'm not going to continue to exist under the oppression of your deluded sense of reality. And then you try to storm that person and force them to see what they're doing. Neither of those works, because they turn you into them by making you so incensed and enraged and frustrated that you say, okay, fine, we're doing violence, let me show you violence, right? My thing is a middle road there, where you never invade their space, never try to force an understanding or an insight on them, never lay claim to an absolute and objective rule over that no man's land of objective reality that exists between the two of you. But also never, ever cede even 1 inch of your sovereign experiential territory when you don't think that what they're saying is true. Come to the negotiation table, but never give them anything that you don't feel good about giving. Never acquiesce to something that you know is crazy to keep the peace, or to make things or just to end the conversation, or just to get off the phone. I will fucking fall over dead in a conversation before I accept a putrid peace. I will not do it. I won't do something. I will not betray myself, right? And say, and then this is the thing too, especially in interaction, especially if it's your romantic partner, tell them, I don't want you to give in to me out of sheer fatigue. I don't want you to say that you understand what I'm saying, or that you think what I'm saying is right, just because you're tired of talking to me. If you need a break, say you need a break. That's fine. I will never give in to you just to end the argument. And I never, ever want you to pretend to agree with me just to get me to shut up. I insist that we build a shared reality together. And if that's not at least work towards that. And if that's not a project that you're willing to sit down and really hammer out with me, well, then we might have to renegotiate the nature of the relationship here too. My experience has been that there are people who would rather have you dominate them and just give in to what you have to say than actually work to build within themselves an understanding of what your perspective is so that they can compare it with their perspective and then kind of adapt it and figure out a way to work together. People are so averse to examining their own internal perceptions and the reasons that they think the way that they do, that they would rather dominate or be dominated than do the work required to actually really understand what the person to whom they're speaking's worldview and kind of model of reality is. And so I think that, what was the actual, because there was something really important in the question. I don't know, can you not get back to it?
I can. This person says, I'm a chronic giver inner.
And I understand that. And and what I suspect is that tendency to give in is really rational, given the environment in which you grew up and given the incentive structure in which your mind, your brain kind of, pruned itself and formed neural pathways, and your mind built this beautiful strategies for survival for you. And there was a time when rolling over and giving in was just the right thing to do. But you're in a different environment now. Or if you're in a similar environment, it's because those patterns that you learned to survive that initial environment, you carried them into subsequent environments, and that environment was shaped by that learned pattern and behavior of giving in. And I can tell you something, there's nothing more, and I'm not saying never admit you're wrong. If you, here's the thing, never, ever, if you don't think that you're wrong, never say, okay, I see that I was wrong, right? On the other hand, there's this wonderful freedom. You're not allowed to give in when you really honestly don't think you've done anything wrong. You don't storm away from the table either. You stay at the table. On the other end, there's this wonderful thing where the moment that you realize that you effed up and that in fact, oh my God, I started this fight. I started this bone picking. I messed up. I completely misread this. Guess what you get to do? You get to submit immediately and 100% to the other person. And you get to say, you know what? In this case, totally screwed up. It was me. The blessing that is, it's like the difference between stopping off the highway the first moment you realize, kind of got to go to the bathroom, versus trying to hold it the whole 9-hour trip to Florida. It's not worth it. You know you're going to go eventually, right? You might as well pull off and just relieve yourself now. The moment you know you're wrong, right? And you're not going to be guilted and shamed and blamed for having to stop and go. Everybody's wrong. Everyone pees. Everyone poops. It's just something that happens, right? And when you have that personal freedom to go, hey, I got to go to the bathroom, right? Now, it's really great. You stop and go to the bathroom. 5 minutes later, you got to stop again. That's the reality of what you need to do. You make a mistake today, tomorrow you make the exact same mistake with the exact same person. The freedom that comes with being able to go, you're not going to believe it. Started the same fight over the same thing again. It's such a wonderful freedom to have. But what you don't want to do is, and I've seen this happen a million times, when you give in when you shouldn't, there will be a compensatory act somewhere in your life where you fail to give in when you should. Like when you let someone who's wrong steamroll you, you will steamroll somebody even when you're wrong. There's this weird thing that happens. And so I say to myself, I don't want to give in now, right? And then go victimize somebody who doesn't deserve it later. Because I can't. I mean, if I push it down, it's going to come out somewhere else.
Okay. Do you want to get to another one of the questions?
Question number 2.
There are a couple questions people submitted that are kind of G&M things that I'll answer in another video. Just I guess as a little aside about Awareness School. Awareness School isn't about G&M. Awareness School and the Ever Better Life course precedes me even finding out about G&M. It is about patterns. It's about perception. It's very, very helpful. Someone said that they have a lot of self-evaluation conflicts because of relationships with narcissistic family members. So Awareness School helps you to understand yourself, your perception, why you think, feel, and act the way that you do. And it helps you to see your self-evaluation patterns. It helps you to understand where that pattern came from. And it helps you to take it apart and to do something new with it. So it's extremely helpful if you're in the stage of, wow, G&M's amazing. And my perception and my conflicts are creating my physical tissue adaptations that's manifesting as this or that symptom. And you're like, what do I do about it? How do I change this pattern? If it's a chronic thing, it's a chronic perception. It's a chronic way that you are engaging, interacting in the world. And so this helps you to get to the source code of that, of your perception and how you're seeing and perceiving reality so that you can change that. So you can change this self-evaluation. You can change this persistent feeling of abandonment or isolation or nobody gets me, nobody understands me. That's a perception that you have, and it happened early, probably because of something traumatic, and now you just see the world through that lens. Awareness School is going to help you to take that lens off, look at it, see how, the times when it makes sense that you're engaging in it and what you can do instead. So it doesn't come directly we're not dealing with the content of someone's, self-devaluation or the content of their health issue. We're dealing with the pattern that leads to the experiential consequence, the physiological adaptation. We're going way high with the pattern. So it's extremely helpful if you are in that position of, how do I unravel this lifetime worth of patterns? Awareness School will help you with that. As far as getting into the details of the GNM stuff, that's not what this particular course is about. So I'll address those in a different one.
How about this black sheep scapegoat within the family?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Black sheep scapegoats within the family. How to move on from the pain of being cast in this character. So I would just begin by saying that there are, one, it makes sense that you feel the way that you do, given your personal history, right? That's always going to be true. So there's this kind of interesting thing in personal change work where you say, okay, two things are probably true. I have permission to be the way that I am. It's okay that I am the way that I am. It's also not really fun to be that way. There's certain aspects about being that way that aren't particularly fun that I'd like to change. And a lot of people in the beginning have a really hard time getting both of those ideas kind of rolling at one time. They can give themselves permission to be as they are, but then they go, but I don't really like it. And then they can say, well, I can change who I am. And then they start feeling bad and down about the fact that they are currently the way that they are. And a lot of, you need a big door to enter into a kind of personal freedom land. And that door consists for me of two ideas. One idea, I'm allowed to be the way that I am. It's emotionally acceptable that I am the way that I am. I don't have to resist and suffer over the fact that I am the way that I am. And I have the possibility to change. Permission to be as I am, power to change. Permission to be as I am, permission to change if I want to. Get both of those ideas going at once, because that's got to kind of function as like the background of your change work. Because what you'll find is that when you start undertaking it, it's almost like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a funny example of like when you get kind of one area of life, physical fitness and finances. You get really physically fit, but your finances aren't that great, and then you start getting your finances together, but then you're stressed because of work, and you might be eating more chocolates than you need to or whatever, and you kind of start feeling not as physically fit, you're not working out as much or whatever, and you're kind of one or the other. And it's figuring out a way of thinking about this that lets me be 100% totally okay with who I am right now, and actively, resourcefully, meaningfully, enriching, engaged in the project of becoming who I'd like to be instead. That's a very big picture thing, but it's super important, and a lot of problems occur because people don't really get that foundation firmly laid. Next, being the black sheep of a family, it's kind of like, I don't know your family, but it might indicate that there's something wrong with you if you weren't the black sheep of it, right? I mean, this is the thing, is like, just because it's the place that you come from doesn't mean that it's something with which you want to fit in. I mean, if it were a family of sheep that were black, the black sheep would be, I don't know if it's white or gray or whatever that wool color of a sheep, And so you might be the black sheep of the family because you don't have the same dysfunctions that your family has. There's a number of reasons that a person becomes the black sheep in a family. And so I think that really actively observing the meaning that you assign to the fact that you're considered the black sheep of the family. What does it mean that these people think that I'm the weirdo? I had to do that in my own relationship, right? I mean, because I was regarded as kind of weird, I still am in some senses, regarded as strange and weird and all of this. And I really had to look at, okay, what does it mean that this person or this group of people thinks that I'm strange, or that this person doesn't understand me? Do I really want to be understood by this person? Ask yourself, how simple would I have to be for these people to understand me? Do I want to be that simple? So you go and you start to examine the assumptions that you're unconsciously using to build and to create your experience of being the black sheep. You get to a place where you're kind of emotionally neutral about it, where it's not good, it's not bad, it just is, right? And then you start getting to a place where you're actually perhaps very grateful that you're the black sheep. And there's this wonderful thing that you go through. A lot of the times, people, when they spend their whole life being, oh my God, everyone else is good and there's something wrong with me. They get really into that. And in order to begin to correct for that, they have to spend a little time flipping the script totally and saying, there's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with them. They're stupid. They're retrograde. They're this, that, whatever, And again, that's kind of like that blowing up and getting super angry. It might not be the best reaction, but it's probably pretty natural. It may be a little season you have to pass through. Eventually, you reach this wonderful promised land of personal freedom. where you are free from having to choose between, is there something wrong with me or something wrong with them? Maybe there's nothing wrong with anybody. Maybe even if there is something wrong with someone, maybe I don't have to burden myself with the belief that there is something wrong with them. You know why? I no longer have to justify my decision to not have a relationship with them. It's an awful thing to have to justify your decision to not relate to another person, because then you've got to come up with all sorts of bad ideas and bad feelings and bad beliefs about how awful they are in order to check inside and go, yeah, it's fine, I'm not calling them on Christmas. They're terrible, and they mistreated me, and they're really wrong and bad. You got to lug that shit around with you, and life is better when you don't have to lug those things around. Now, what people are hoarders sometimes of justifications, because they don't know how to just do what's right. For the fact that they feel better when they don't engage with certain people isn't for them sufficient justification to go and not engage with those people without feeling guilty about the fact that they aren't engaging with them. My objective for you is to get it so that you can travel light, because you don't need that much. You don't need anybody to understand anything that you're doing except for you. This is one of the things. I often think I need somebody else's understanding in order for me to be okay, when what I really need is my own understanding that I don't need their understanding in order for me to be okay. Like, I need to understand that their lack of understanding isn't a problem. There is understanding missing from the equation that's contributing to my suffering, but it's my own understanding that's missing. Now, when I can get to the point of actually really feeling that and just sort of vibing that all day long, that's part of the core machine from which I think. Listen, I don't need there to be anything wrong with you in order for you and I to not talk to each other. I don't have to decide that the fact that we're not in a relationship means that there's something wrong with me or you. A lot of the times when you see people, or when you find yourself kind of rocking a hard place doing something dysfunctional, it's because there's this artificial constraint that has been placed upon you, or that perhaps you're placing upon yourself. Somebody has to be bad or wrong here. Either you're bad and wrong, or I'm bad and wrong. So if you find yourself trying to look for faults in another person, your child, your husband, your wife, whatever, or if you think that they're constantly trying to find fault with you, sometimes it's that curiosity thing. It can be very useful to go, what would make this person's behavior make sense? I'm not excusing it. Now, this is not an interpersonal exercise. This doesn't mean you get to call them on their shit. This doesn't mean that you got to be a doormat because you're psychologically adept and you understand that it makes sense. Does not mean that at all. There is no intrapersonal insight. Every behavior makes sense when you view it in the full context in which it's occurring, for example, that obligates you to acquiesce or bend over in an interpersonal relationship. I might understand that it's his trauma causing me to treat me this way. That understanding does not oblige me to put up with his treatment of me. You have to be real clear on that. My understanding of another person's motivations are for my information. It is not something that can constrain my ability to reject that behavior. Well, he was abused by his mother when he was growing up. Well, that's very sad and unfortunate. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It means he's got some work to do. Does not mean that you have to take a beating. Does not mean that you have to put up with the bullshit. Does not mean that you have to extend to him more consideration than you can in good conscience without sacrificing your soul and your spirit and your psychological well-being. Offer over to him. Doesn't obligate you to anything. Watch out for the misunderstanding that understandings obligate you to put up with things that you otherwise would not put up with. Complete and accurate understandings open up vistas of options. They do not narrow you down and confine you to having to put up with things or having to do things that you would not otherwise have to do. And I even forgot about what I was talking about before.
Someone said, I've taken the self-development thing to questioning what I need to alchemize if I don't get along with someone, to probably a point of detriment.
And, that's one good mode of thinking. And at some level of your life, there probably is something that you could work on. And it may be the people that you're attracting into. Here you go. For every time that these things aren't true, there's a level at which they are. If I am operating under, say, if I've got an unresourceful relationship to the notion of alchemizing things, that will cause me to attract into my life people who will treat me in ways that will invite me to discover the error that exists in my relationship to the ideas of alchemy. And so at that level, it's true. So you want to look for it and say, if my understanding is constraining me, if it's limiting me, if it's making me make sense out of putting up with more bullshit, if it's making me feel guilty about standing up for myself, if it is narrowing the range of options that are acceptable to me rather than expanding that range of options, right? There's something wrong with the idea, or there's something wrong with my relationship to it. Now, very often it's something wrong with your relationship to it. And sometimes it's not even that the relationship is bad or defective. It's that it's just incomplete. It's just yeah, I need to alchemize something. And it's my ideas about alchemy that say, I should be able to go sha 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 and turn you into an angel. Maybe that's not true. Maybe what I need to do is to do, I mean, a lot of the times when it comes to that kind of, let me change, the world is my mirror stuff, a lot of that work you got to do indirectly. You got to, and there's even a thing in the Bible, right, where somebody's like, okay, well, I think someone said to Jesus, if you're so great and all this different stuff, why don't you go ahead and make this thing happen? And Jesus is like, don't tempt me. Don't play this with me. Don't tell me to snap my fingers and turn her into an angel and turn him into a nice guy. It's not like that. Go forward, and do work on your self concept moving forward, but don't necessarily. And it makes sense. I think you're just a good student of it. And you're trying to be rigorous in your application of it. And that's really great and that'll serve you. But you'll still have these moments, right, where you realize, okay, maybe that's for application at another level. Maybe what I'm learning to do now is to have access to that really big picture. The world is me pushed out. And also to have, I mean, a certain level of humility required to be willing to be a human being that goes, listen, I don't like you and I don't want to talk to you. I mean, that's allowed. You're okay to do that. You're allowed to do that. And there is for me there, I found myself kind of getting stuck up about that stuff. Like, I don't really like this person, but if I come right out and act upon that insight, let me launder that through some kind of weird spiritual process, right? And I want to push them out of my life, but I want to push them out of my life mentally because it seems unspiritual or something, just to come right out and say, this isn't working for me. And it's kind of like, well, is that a little bit of is that a strange kind of like, not an ego thing? Is that like a pride thing? What's going on there? Why am I asking the Lord to turn the garden hose for me off outside, but I can just walk outside and turn it off myself? There's certain relationship things where it's kind of like you can alchemize your experience of me doing a certain behavior. You could also just go, hey, Steve, would you mind not doing that? And I might say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, next.
These are all very good. I don't know if I thought Instagram maybe cuts you off at an hour. We'll see if it does because we are at an hour now. And if it cuts off, maybe we'll do a part 2 tomorrow.
Let's see. We did the black sheep a little bit. I think, we kind of got a little bit away from that. Oh, being cast in that character. One, so what? It's probably a good thing that you're the black sheep, right? And two, a lot of the times the feelings that you're feeling, you've been taught to feel those things. They taught you to feel this way. They taught you to regard yourself in this way. I would just start watching those feelings and I would question the reality of them. The fact that I feel this way, the fact that I feel estranged, the fact that I feel bad about not being understood and I feel isolated and alone and all of that. Are those just emotions that I've learned to manufacture in me? Is that just a habit that I'm in? Is it even really true? Does it have a bearing on reality? Do I want to be understood by everybody? Do I need to be understood by everybody? Is it that I'm estranged from them? Is that why I'm lonely? Or is it because I'm estranged from myself? Very often, what a lot of people will do is they'll say, you're the weird one. You're estranged from us. Even if you're present physically, even if you come to every event, you're estranged from us, and that we kind of like, talk about you when you're not around, or kind of go, oh, that's just so-and-so, or whatever, right? And then you look at how they're treating you, and on the basis of how they treat you, you reevaluate yourself. You downgrade or degrade your concept of self. You look at how they see you, and then you go, okay, they see me this way. I should see myself that way too. And in so doing, you become alienated or estranged from yourself. And that feels shitty. And what you go do moving forward is that you conflate those things and you go, I feel really bad because I'm estranged from my family because I was always the black sheep. It's like, what if the problem wasn't that you were kind of estranged or alienated from them? What if when you weren't looking, that alienation, sleight of hand, kind of con jobbed you in to alienating from yourself by concluding certain things about yourself? What does it mean that I don't fit in with these people? Must be something wrong with me. This idea that you won't fit in the world because you didn't fit in the group of 5 or 10 or 15 people among whom you happen to grow up. As you begin to watch that and examine that stuff, you'll see how not real it is, and the feelings will just start to go away, and you'll just start to become less certain about all the things that you're currently sure about, that perhaps it's being sure about maybe is causing you suffering. So hopefully it's general again, but hopefully it's useful. Here's a really good one. I'm becoming a little narcissistic as a result of a narcissistic upbringing. First of all, there's hope for you, just based on the fact that you, one, recognize that, and two, are willing to kind of confess that or discuss that. Even the vast majority of people in the world would not be willing to utter that realization inside their own mind.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even allow internal dialogue that goes, oh my God, I think I'm becoming this way, because they'd be afraid somebody around them would hear. So the fact that you're asking that question, very good. More of that. More permission to go, ugh, I think I'm being not me. I think I'm being somebody else. I think I'm mothering my children as though I were my mother, right? Get very clear about that when that's happening without feeling any guilt. Because you can do one of two things. When you kind of are realizing, I think I got some narcissism going on, you can feel bad about the fact that there's some narcissism going on, or you can feel luscious, happy, proud, relieved, grateful, reluctant, elated, excited, motivated, and hopeful that you are aware of the fact that that process is transpiring. What's the headline going to be? You got a couple of problems, and that's really bad, and you're bad because you're inflicting it on your children? Not a good headline. That doesn't make me feel like I'm moving into the future with a good feeling under my wings. Or is the headline, woman has profoundly powerful awareness of process unfolding within her that will eventually cause that process to wither up and go away. Woman saves her children from having to deal with a totally narcissistic mother by realizing that that process is occurring. Are you going to celebrate it, or are you going to be depressed? What's the takeaway? What's the meaning assignment going to be? That might be the end of, that might be all you need to hear. Because if you lean into that process, you'll do very well. What to do to stop the cycle? Just watch it. What I would do, give yourself 100% permission to be a complete narcissist, so that you do not psychologically incentivize not noticing when you're doing narcissistic stuff. You need to reward yourself when you notice yourself being sort of narcissistic with regard to your children or to your husband or to whoever, right? Notice it and say, oh my God, I caught myself. I get a treat. I get a reward. I get a voucher, right? To skip one bad feeling. And this is not, I'm not just like bullshitting you. Like, this actually is essential. You have to build an apparatus inside you that rewards and incentivizes those insights, because the insights are everything. If you string enough of those insights together, it'll get so that you're so aware of that pattern that the pattern can't even initiate, it can't even start, but you'll nip it in the bud before it even gets to the point of being a feeling that manifests as a behavior that affects your children. If you will do that and lean into that, have the courage to be kind to yourself. Let me put it that sounds a little too sweet, and that upsets me, because I think someone might think that I'm concerned someone won't realize how powerful it is because it sounds like I'm being nice to you, right? But the reality is, have the courage to be kind to yourself, when being kind to yourself is the most important thing you can do to facilitate the changes that you want to create in yourself. That's the thing, because sometimes being nice to yourself in those moments of realization, it takes so much courage, because there's an apparatus in you that makes you feel irresponsible if you don't do what doesn't work, right? E.g. beating yourself up, e.g. condemning yourself, right? Condemning yourself for being narcissistic so that you can what? Activate the machine that justifies the narcissistic behavior. Oh my God, I was so narcissistic to my children. I feel so bad about it. I'm a terrible woman. Voice goes, well, you're not as bad as your mother. And by the way, he was behaving this way. And those kids do behave, and you did. They will walk all over you if you don't do that. Anytime you condemn yourself, you're laying the foundation for self-justification, right? And when you condemn a dysfunction, you're activating the justification machine. When you activate the justification machine, what are you doing? You're providing cover for the dysfunctional behavior that you don't want to have in your life. So what you do is you just go, hallelujah, praise the Lord. I noticed myself doing something that didn't serve me today. It is a wonderful gold star day. What a wonderful woman I am. I would submit to you that that you are a better person as a result of having a little narcissist pattern, and you become aware of it and you go, oh shit, there's a narcissist pattern. Don't want that to continue. That is a better person than a person who is just simply not narcissistic. There's a lot of people in the world that aren't narcissistic through no real valiant effort on their own. They just happen to have not had the predisposition or to have not been raised in that environment. But they're not doing work on themselves. You're doing work on yourselves. You're not just not being bad. You're actively endeavoring to become a good person, to become a more well-adjusted person who can feel better and treat other people well as a result of that feeling. And so there's something truly very kind of valiant and wonderful about that aspect of yourself. And I think that if you'll allow yourself to derive satisfaction from your willingness to do the work, your gas tank for resourceful work doing will be so full that you'll do so much more of it so much more quickly.
Yeah. And from my perspective, because again, if you haven't picked up on it, that's a little bit of what I'm working through myself, is just like a little ruthlessness with my awareness of I have certain tendencies, and if I'm not aware, it's like my preset autopilot. If I'm not paying attention, if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm not really taking that time to do my awareness work, which is why I love that we do awareness school a couple times a year now, because it's it's so easy to fall back into old habits if you're not being aware. Like that's what the solution is. Then that's really why we teach what we teach in the way we teach it, because if you cannot see it, you can't do anything about it. The fact that you're recognizing it, the fact that you see that you have these tendencies, it's like, oh, I need my eyes open. My eyes need to be open all the time. I need to see, because if I'm not paying attention, I have my default tendencies are to behave in, in this narcissistic or controlling, or, I override other people's reality. I want it just my way. I paint the picture of how it is, and I get mad if anybody else has anything to say about it. It's like, I need to see myself doing that. And I need to be aware what it's like to do it, what it's like to not do it, what it's like to do something different. I need to paint new pictures. I need to create new avenues of engagement and interaction. So when I have to monitor my reactions to people. I need to notice when I get prickly, when I get angry, when I want to lash out, when I want to, and so I had to become aware. And that's what the work of the 10 weeks of looking at this framework for understanding how you do reality. How do I experience life? What is this like for me? And what we just describe it in ways where it's like, oh, it just puts these pieces together where you're able to see something that you didn't see before. And you guys probably can tell that Steve's really, really good at this. He's like really, really good at taking a problem, taking an issue, and helping you to unravel it and to see these different angles, these different perspectives. And it's just like, your mind is blown at the ability that you can have an experience and it be a problem and not know what to do, and just with a few words, like, here's the way out of the woods, here's the way out of the woods, that's really what the 10 weeks of the group coaching is people coming with these types of life problems, us sitting down and doing this together for at least 2 hours every Monday, and we have 3 bonus sessions, and we unravel these patterns. And you get to the 10 modules of the Ever Better Life course is like the framework for this stuff. So you get this course that you're taking, and then we meet on Mondays and we unpack it and we apply it to your life in ways that just like really, really make sense. Earlier, Ashley, she commented because she was in our last round of awareness school and she loved it. And she had this wonderful experience of like really getting it, really seeing things that are so beneficial for her in her life and her family. And that's what this is about. It's about connecting you with your inner resources, the stuff that's already there. It's, and the things that we say, it's like in ways that you can get it. A lot of this stuff you already know, but there's something about awareness school and the way it's laid out and just the work that we do together that makes it come alive. That's really, really fun. And so we love doing this. And, if you're like, this stuff is really good, and the way that we're discussing it, if it lights you up and if it makes sense to you, you really might want to consider enrolling, because it's so fun, and it's like such a life transformation. And you have the course forever. Every time you go back through it, it's a whole fresh new experience. So it's like it's an investment you make one time. We go through 10 weeks together, but it's like gonna keep paying the dividends and the returns of the awareness work. So I guess, yeah, if we do get cut off at some point, it starts 2 weeks from tomorrow, so January 23rd, and we have an early bird enrollment going through tomorrow night. So that's the awareness school stuff.
Yeah, and something you said is very important was you said be ruthless with the pattern. And and what was I saying? Be gentle with yourself, right? And I'm glad you said that, because there's a direct relationship there. The more gentle I am with myself, the more ruthless I can be with the pattern. That's the information programming that's running inside, that's manifesting as thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you then look at and are tempted to identify with and feel bad about, or look at and say, oh my God, I've got 2 choices. I either explain to myself why I'm right in doing that, or I've got to feel guilty about doing a terrible thing. Well, let me justify it. That's the trap that we want to abstain from. The more you know the pattern isn't you, the more decisive you can be and kind of like, cut the head off, right? And having that ability to distinguish between those 2 things, you have no idea how much pleasure there is in dispatching an unresourceful pattern. If every time in your path, it's like this, it's like there's a nail sticking up out of a table, and I got my hammer and I'm trying to hammer it in, and I smack my thumb and I go, oh my God, carpentry is so painful. People think personal growth is painful because they take these really powerful ideas and sometimes they inflict them upon themselves instead of really targeting the pattern. And actually, sometimes the head of a nail is kind of hard to hit. It's sort of small. Sometimes the part of the pattern that's protruding up into your awareness that you can actually see, it's not that big. It's like a little pinpoint, right? Really easy to miss and really easy to smack your thumb. It's very easy to transition from being aware of the fact that there's a pattern unfolding that isn't serving you into condemning yourself for the pattern that's happening. The pattern is not who you are, no matter how long it's been there, and no matter how long it's been influencing your behavior. The pattern is who you aren't. Who you are is that capacity that you have to see something going on inside you and go, whoa, what's that? Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I don't really like the way I've treated my children. Oh, I don't really like the fact that I'm arguing that I deserve to be treated that way by somebody else. That's the real you, the part that's kind of going, wait a minute, something here doesn't seem quite right. What you want to avoid doing is identifying with the dysfunction that you see or the unresourceful pattern that you see, because that short circuits that awareness process. The pattern is who you are when you aren't being who you really are. It's who you're not. You look away and your mind starts running default programming that has nothing to do with the true essence of who you are. And then when you come back online, you go, oh my God, I did these things. And I mean, at an interpersonal level, yes, you did those things. At an intrapersonal level, though, the you that you experience yourself to be didn't. She was on vacation. She was out to lunch. And when she was out to lunch, a pattern came online. And see, this is the thing too, having these patterns and having them be unconscious, it's almost like you've given like a power of attorney to certain things that you learned growing up. And you gave that stuff permission to sign your name, right? And to take action in your name. So you check out, you're stressed out, you're thinking about shopping, you're thinking about business, you're thinking about whatever, and you just blip out for a second. When you come to, you realize you've said something nasty, or used an unpleasant tone of voice, or gobbled up a whole box of chocolates when you didn't want to, or something. Now, did you do it? Well, it depends on the level at which we're talking. You're responsible for what occurred at an interpersonal level. I can't go unconscious and say something really nasty to Melissa, and then when Melissa goes, hey, why are you talking to me like that? I can go, oh, it wasn't me that did it. I was, see, this is one of those ways people can abuse these principles, right? Two things can be true at once. Interpersonally, I'm responsible for whatever stuff comes out of this mouth, right? Whatever tone, whatever content, whatever. Now, if we trace it back in time, can we find if my dad had done this different, and if my mom had done that, maybe I wouldn't have done it, maybe not. But nobody is going to do anything about anything if we evade responsibility in that way. What I want to do is within myself, I'm going to check inside and say, God, there's a part of me that would never do that. There's a part of me that would never want to speak to you that way, never want to use that tone of voice, never want to say something that was going to make you feel the way that I made you feel, and yet I did it. What's that about? Let me scan. What was the pattern? What was the criteria? What was the impulse? What was the whatever? Was it in that moment, did I enter into an area of myself where the experience was you hurt or you be hurt. A lot of times people say some really nasty things to people that they love, and it's incomprehensible to everyone, most of all them, why they said that thing. They weren't paying attention, and they floated into a bad neighborhood within themselves wherein the choice is or seems to be say something hurtful or have something hurtful said to you. Hurt or be hurt. And when the choice is hurt or be hurt, it makes rational sense for a person to choose to hurt, right? So what we want to try to do is get that person. Now, I am not saying that to a woman who is being abused by her husband. That is not for her. That is information for the man to sit down, let's do some work on you so that you can behave acceptably towards other human beings. That's very important to understand. That there is a certain hierarchy of, someone else mentioned something here about, I have narcissistic someone in my family, and what is it? They're being violent and abusive. And it's like, okay, well, we need to know what violent and abusive means, right? I mean, if there's a physical element to it, that's a deal breaker, we're done. We can talk about spiritualism over the phone, maybe, right? From across the country or whatever. So it is also very important that you understand that there may be specifics, specific things that are true for you that maybe seem not normal for you, but you kind of take for granted, that are maybe not at all things that we would realize are going on, that might decisively modify the kind of advice that we would be giving you. There's information, I guarantee you, that 5 or 10 people that are watching this video, if we had that information and we were speaking directly to you, we would change the way that we were ordering the things that we were saying, and perhaps even change some of the things that we were saying on the basis of that. So it is really important to keep in mind, you may be dealing with certain extenuating circumstances that make some of the stuff that we're talking about here, although maybe it'll be useful for you eventually, might not be kind of like the first order of business. So just kind of like as a disclaimer for, I don't know who's watching the video. We can't know. What's that? That's a crypto chart. That's not relevant right now. Who wants to know how Nakacoin is doing? Not me. It's a little depressing. I think that's pretty good. So just observe that. So going back to the whole narcissistic mom thing. Also, listen, your children are very lucky to have a parent that is interested in doing this work on herself. Remind yourself of that. Soothe yourself with that. One of the best things that you can do for your children is to soothe yourself. bring the energy, bring the tension in the room down. You feeling guilty and beating up on yourself for not being a better mother in your own eyes than you are is going to push you up to the emotional threshold when you go over it, you sometimes say and do things around your kids that maybe you wish you hadn't done, maybe not the best things to do. So find ways to engage with this process of kind of unhooking these automatic patterns of behavior that don't involve putting extra stress on yourself. Don't do this little game where you say, oh my God, I'm trying to fix problems I should have had before I even had kids. Now I got kids. Now I'm behind. Don't do all that. Everything's happening exactly as it's supposed to, exactly the right timetable. Your children are very intelligent, creative human beings too. They're responsible for their experiences moving forward. They're going to do a great job transmuting whatever it is that they encounter from you. You just start having grace with yourself. Model for them, because I bet your kids aren't going to be perfect when they grow up either. So if you can model for them having grace with yourself, while also not evading responsibility, while also not sweeping things under the rug, I'm dealing with things within myself that need dealing with in a very forthright and decisive manner, and I'm not losing sleep over it, and I'm not punishing myself. I'm not making myself a victim by making myself feel so bad about the fact that I made a mistake. Model that for them. That's a tremendous gift. I think it would be a terrible burden to burden your children with being a perfect parent. Because that would create a lot of problems for them. Best thing I think you can do is be imperfect. Strive to be perfect in the way that you deal with your own imperfection. Just say, let it be okay without sleeping on it, without unhooking. Can I find a way to resourcefully, actively, constructively engage with a project of personal improvement that does not involve inflicting pain upon myself or talking shit about myself or feeling bad about myself? Can I do both those things at once? Can I feel good about how I am and feel great about my capacity to get better? You model that for children. It's a wonderful thing. And that's something that will allow them to do whatever they want in life. It's something that will be useful no matter what kind of life they decide they want to live. So you're doing a good job. And you're always getting better. It feels good. Doesn't have to be bad. I'm 39 and just starting to realize my mom might be narcissistic. How do I know? You'll know. But seriously though, do you want to say something about this one?
No, go for it.
People get very good out of making sense out of the behavior that they have to tolerate or that they've assumed that they have to tolerate. They've gotten very good at making concessions, at explaining things away. They do all these different things. And the thing is, sometimes you learn how to do that so well that you unlearn how to not do it. And so what I would do is I would observe her behavior. I would observe how you feel, right? And I would see, like, what's the relationship? What is it that she's doing that seems narcissistic to you? What specifically is, and if you don't know, that's okay. That's a big part of it, because a lot of times this stuff is subtle. A lot of times, especially if you've been conditioned to not know, people have been trained to not know. I think people who are narcissistic have mastered the art of not realizing what they're doing. Most of the people in the world who do really horrendous things, an essential component of their ability to do that nasty, horrendous stuff is to not realize that they're doing it. They are masters of keeping that process outside of their conscious awareness. So when they say to you, I don't think I did that, I never meant to do that, whatever, one of the biggest challenges, they aren't lying. At least not in the sense that we think of lying. They aren't inside going, oh, I know she's right, but I'm going to tell her that she's not so that I can continue doing this nefarious thing. They're lying, but they're not just lying to you. That lie extends to and penetrates into themselves. That lie permeates their consciousness and reaches down into the unconscious processes, right? So that and it's a little trick, and the more you watch, the better you can get at seeing it. I see what you just did there. I said, do you have my car keys? You went into your kitchen of your mind. You opened one drawer, the drawer you knew those keys weren't in. You didn't see it, and you get, no, I don't have them. People will say that. You'll accuse somebody of manipulating you, right? And they'll do a quick little search inside their mind and go, was I intentionally manipulating them? Did you hear the fudge word there? Intentionally, right? Here's another one. They assume that because they're not aware of doing something, that they must necessarily not be doing it. Now, if I assume that if I'm not aware of doing something, that means I'm not doing it. And some people, it's not even if I'm not aware that I'm doing it. It's if I wasn't aware of doing it at the time that you said that I was doing it, that means I wasn't doing it. So that even if you make them aware after the fact, They'll go inside though, and they won't make explicit the reasoning, because if they made explicit the reasoning, it'd be obvious how ridiculous it is. But the reasoning basically goes, at the time that you're accusing me of doing this thing, was I aware of the fact that I was doing it? No, I wasn't. That means I didn't do it. Did I do it? Yes. But I wasn't aware of doing it, so that means I didn't do it. It means it's inadmissible. So the more you kind of observe even the insanity has a structure. And a lot of the times that insanity, it is coherent. I mean, they consistently use the same types of reasoning. And the less upset you get and the more observant you are, the more you'll see how their thinking is structured. And you can start to say things like, do you think that the fact that you're not aware of having said that means that you didn't say it? Now, they might say, yes, but I want them on the record. I want to force them to go on the record as believing that the fact that they aren't aware of having done something means that they aren't doing it or that they didn't do it. Because then I'll take it farther and I'll go, so do you think that anytime a person's unaware of doing something, that necessarily means they haven't done it? Do you think anyone's ever done anything in history without being aware of the fact that they're doing it? So is it just you? It's only when you aren't aware of having done something. So do you think that, so for instance, if I were to say something to you, but I wasn't aware of saying it, does that mean that I didn't say it? Force them as they go through, force them to have that conversation. Make explicit for yourself what their structure of their thinking is, and then test it out by asking them certain questions that will require them. You're not requiring them to reveal it to you, because a lot of times you already know. You're requiring them to reveal it to themselves by stating to you on the record what their line of reasoning is. If they have a tantrum, if they sulk, if they try to get victim-y, or if they simply shut down and withdraw, you'll know who you're dealing with. I'm dealing with a person who at some level knows that their internal processes cannot withstand even the slightest amount of structured, systematic scrutiny, right? I know who I'm dealing with. That's where the dishonesty comes on them. They don't even know that they're lying, right? But if you even say to them, you disengage every time we get close to you realizing what it is that you're doing. You unhook from this every time I'm getting close to making it impossible for you to not see my perspective and see that it's true. You disengage. You flip the table over every time we get close to it. Now, I'm not going to keep playing checkers with you if you keep doing that. And I'll tell you that's exactly the reason. And you'll never be able to say, you don't know why I won't talk to you. It's because every time I talk to you, this stuff happens. And every time I try to get to the bottom of this stuff with you, what do? You resist, resist, resist. And when you get really close to no longer being able to not understand where I'm coming from, you throw a tantrum and short circuit the whole thing. Isn't that what you're doing right now, right? And just give them a chance, and if they continue to do it, that's fine. Now it's your responsibility. You know who you're dealing with. Are you going to continue doing business with that person?
Yeah, someone says, give your mom feedback about her behavior, and then you'll learn if she's a narcissist. They cannot accept looking in the mirror. They simply cannot. That is fabulous description.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. It's very elegant and just straightforward. You said it better than I did because it was more concise. Absolutely. People will often validate your suspicions about them by how they react to you sharing. And I don't mean suspicions like, hey, I think I'm suspicious. But so for example, it seems like you think that your opinion of my personal independent behavior has nothing to do with you, matters more than it actually does. And if they blow up about that instantaneously, that if you say to a person, I'm not really enjoying our interactions, or I think we need to take some time apart, if they get their feelings hurt, that's understandable. That's a reasonable thing. But if they blow up at you, or they freak out, or they immediately go, oh, this is something that I was talking to somebody just the other day, and they had distanced themselves from their sibling. And after they had distanced themselves from their sibling goes, listen, I think we need to get a little distance between us, right? So they reacted. It's like, you're not breaking up with me. I'm breaking up with you kind of thing. Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting, this isn't about anything other than who's going to have the upper hand, who decided to take the distance, who decided to create the space, so on and so forth. That provides really useful information, and it predicts what their priorities are going to be moving forward. So she probably is. And then just observe it. Are you afraid to express yourself? When you express yourself, what happens? The other thing is, look at your experience of your mother's behavior. Because if you feel anything other than what is wrong with that lady? When she behaves in outrageous ways, she taught you to feel that way. If you feel guilty when she gets mad about things that it doesn't make any sense for her to get mad about, where do you think you learn how to feel guilty about somebody else's crazy behavior? That crazy person probably taught you to feel that way. So sometimes you can observe within yourself the inclination to feel guilty or afraid or anxious. How often do you find yourself saying, what would my mom think about that? Oh, if I go out to eat in the middle of the week, if I let the kids have a candy bar at nighttime, if I let them stay up, or whatever, if my husband and I go on vacation, or if I whatever, how often in situations like that do you find yourself going, oh, if my mom finds out about that, or I hope my mom doesn't know about that, or oh, I hope she doesn't say anything. That voice, who installed that? Was it you? I don't think it was you. I don't think you woke up one day and said to yourself, you know what would be wonderful? It'd be wonderful every time I thought about doing something nice with my family, I said to myself, oh, but my mom might not like it. You didn't do that. Somebody put that there, and it was probably her.
How should you respond when they deflect and turn it and start pointing out all you do wrong so they didn't have to self-confront?
So we're on the working assumption that we're going to continue interacting with that person. I mean, depending on what stage of the relationship you are, I might simply go, okay, you know, it, I, I'll see you later, maybe, But practically speaking, what I would do, and this is what I would do, like if I'm in a situation where it's like my job to assist with this or to like try to create awareness here, I am relentless in calling attention to what they are doing. I don't get provoked. I don't take the ball that they put out there and run with it. I do not defend myself. I don't deny absurd accusations. Do not deny absurd accusations. You are playing their game. The thing is, when they make accusations against you, their objective is not to get you to accept that those things are true. Their objective is to get the scrutiny off of themselves and what they're doing. And so you go, okay, so now what you've done is started to get the attention off of yourself and the issue that we were discussing, which is how you were treating me, by talking about everything that's wrong with me. Now, I'm happy to put a pin in that and come back to discussing my behavior and how you'd like for me to change it later if you want to. But for now, let's take it back to the topic, which topic was a specific thing that you said or did to me that I found unacceptable. Let's stay on that topic and let's address that, and then we'll get to the next thing. And then they'll try to divert it, and they'll go, you always do this and you always do that. And I said, oh, see, that's part of what we're going to talk about later. We're first going to finish. Do you see what you're doing? You're doing everything you can to equivocate. You're doing everything you can to, you're doing, what's it called? Whataboutism. You're doing everything you can to avoid discussing the issue that I brought up. Why is that? Let's talk about the issue and by the way, let's not even talk about that issue. Let's talk about the fact that you do this. Anytime somebody points something out about you, this is a thing that you're doing. This is a thing that people do. When we're talking about issue A, you avoid talking about issue A by talking about issue B. You weren't talking about issue B before I was talking about issue A. We're always so graceful.
I know, right?
Why? This is the thing. You can even say to them, these grievances that you have with me may well be legitimate, but do you know what's not legitimate? What's not legitimate is your choice of timing. You chose to bring this up in response to an issue that I took with you. That's not how this works, right? And it also makes me think that this issue that you have with me is kind of bullshit, because if you weren't complaining about it before, you didn't have a problem with me until I started voicing a problem with you. Right? That doesn't make any sense to me. Let's tidy up. Let's address the problems in the order in which they arose. I brought up a complaint first. Let's settle that complaint, right? Now, to the extent that my behavior or complaints that you have with my behavior are relevant, we'll admit them to that conversation. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to use things that you don't like about me as a way to avoid talking about an issue that I brought up with you. And every single time you attempt to do that, I'm going to throw a flag on the field and I'm going to go, can't help but notice that you did the thing again, which is that you moved from sandbox A to sandbox B. I submit that we finished the conversation in sandbox A and that then we move to sandbox B and we'll talk about sandbox B exclusively. Is that acceptable to you? They'll freak out. The more sense you make and the calmer you become. Because remember, what they need in those moments, they have this deep and profound intuitive competence. They know exactly what they need. They need a shit show. They need a diversion. They need an explosion in the background so that they can slither away. They need a smoke screen so that they can get out of having to answer questions that they know they are fucked if they have to answer. They're in the courtroom. They are on the stand. They are being cross-examined and they got nothing. They're going to have to perjure themselves, right? in an obvious way in order to answer these questions in any way that doesn't sink them. So they're just praying for a gas line to blow up in the courtroom or for an airplane to crash right outside the courtroom, right? Now, what they're hoping they can do is anger you by doing a disingenuous tactic and changing the subject, right? They're hoping that your righteous and appropriate indignation to their skeevy, shisty maneuver will provide them the cover they need to escape. Oh boy, when you don't give it to them though, and you go, instead of getting angry, go, you always do this, you're calm and you're clear on what they're doing, then they have to supply all of the emotional tantruming to create a diversion. And then you go, wow, that's quite an emotional outburst, right? And sometimes they'll even start crying, depending on who they are and what their relationship to you is and what the history is and stuff. And they'll start crying. And you can go, okay, so I can see that you're really upset about that. Let's calm down a little bit, and then we're going to come back to sandbox A. Whatever you need. You need to drink water. We got to go for a walk. We need to blow our nose. We need to do whatever. That's fine. I want you to know, though, that this relationship there is one way forward in this relationship with me, and it is through the conversations pertaining to sandbox A. Now, you can go, I don't want to talk to you, get out of my house. That's fine. That's your right to do that. They're always allowed to do that. And you got to honor that if that's what they want to do. But what you want, what they're looking for, because they want to keep a relationship with you because they can't abuse you if you're not in a relationship with them. What they're looking for, and they're trying to wheedle, they want a dishonest route forward in that relationship. And this is kind of coming back to the whole thing. I'm sorry because I've been going for a minute, but this is like
so good.
We're on it. We're
so
on
good.
it. What they're looking for is a dishonest pathway forward into a relationship with you, which is why that willingness to cut shit off totally is so useful, even if cutting things off isn't going to be the final outcome. Think about it like this. Training yourself with martial arts can be a very fulfilling activity, separate and apart from your ability to defend yourself in a real physical altercation. There are benefits that accrue independent of the ability to defend yourself against someone who actually means you harm. Confidence in yourself, you become more what you might call unfuckwithable. I mean, there's a certain vibe that a person who knows how to take care of their business radiates out. And it says, please don't make me hurt you. And that's a good thing to radiate out in certain situations, right? So in your relationship with these people, you seal off every dishonest path forward into a future relationship with you so that there is but one pathway forward, and that is the honest pathway forward, where they at least enter into a process of having open conversations with you about things that are important to you about the way that they treat you. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to agree with you, right? Now, they'll try to say that. They'll go, well, I guess it's just your way or the highway, right? Narcissistic projection. You go, no, listen, insisting that you hear me, and insisting that you not change the subject, and insisting that if you do change the subject, that when we finish that conversation, we're going to jinsaki and circle back to sandbox A, right? That is not forcing you to agree with me, right? That's forcing you to engage with the reality of who I am, including certain realities that are perhaps inconvenient for you. You give them only one honest pathway forward. And I got to tell you, if you offer anybody dishonest pathways forward into a future relationship with you, you are kind of, to some degree, a dishonest person. That's kind of a dishonest thing to do, as far as I can tell. I'm not saying about you. This is what I say to myself. I'm not saying I think about it this way. And in that way, I am complicit. The narcissistic pattern doesn't just exist in the narcissist. It exists also in those who enable, who participate, who concede. And I understand all of the reasons that would cause a good person to do all of those things. But at some point, it doesn't matter how good your reasons are when the thing you're doing is really bad. And this is really bad for everybody. And at some point, you got to start filling those dishonest pathways forward with concrete. Now, that isn't cutting that person off. If you fill all the dishonest pathways forward with concrete, and the only pathway forward, the only tunnel left is the honesty tunnel, and they choose not to take it, you're not cutting them off. The tunnel is wide open. You could drive a semi-truck through it, right? But they don't want to take that tunnel. And then you get to really getting to what they're actually insisting on. They're not insisting on a relationship with you. They're insisting on a relationship with you on their terms, and you can fuck off if you don't like it, but you can't because you're the daughter and it's your job to stay with them one way or another. And that really begins to reveal how sick this stuff actually is. And playing the victim is an essential component of the sickness, right? Because you got to ping pong from persecutor to victim. Because if you're just pure persecutor all the time, anybody with a backbone is eventually going to stand up and say you're nuts. But if you go back and forth demonic persecutor to pathetic victim, well, then you can emotionally confuse a person in a way that might keep a sane, smart, decent individual enthralled in your nonsense. You disorient them by creating these really strong, confusing poles of emotion so that they just get so fucking confused. They're just like, God, I mean, I got a fucking family and a life and kids and a job and shit to do. And I got to, and you go, okay, fine, whatever, right? That might be appropriate with like a 2.5-year-old. It's not appropriate with a 70-year-old woman, right? At some point, somebody in this world has to put the burden of reorientation and reorganization on them. And I'm sorry, I'm like an evangelistic fervor. I'm sorry to you.
No, it's so good. Everyone says it's amazing. It's
but
good. Keep
at
going.
some point, somebody in this world has to have the balls, the courage, the gumption to give that person an opportunity to confront their bullshit. They deserve it. They deserve somebody who, like a kid, a bad, misbehaving, naughty, bratty kid. I was kind of that. I gotta admit, for a big part of my young childhood, I was kind of an asshole, right? And I needed an adult who was just not gonna take any shit from me. And I'll tell you, when I encountered it, it wasn't fun and it was a little shocking, but it afforded me this wonderful and firm thing to push against and change the direction that I was heading in my life in terms of being an entitled little jerk, right? And some people make it well into their elder years without ever encountering that. So every time you don't confront them, you are depriving them of an opportunity to face their shit and do something about it. And you can't force them to take advantage of that opportunity. But I tell you what you can do. You can offer them that opportunity. And when you offer them that opportunity, your hands are clean, they are clear, you are good, you did right by that person. You cannot afford to believe that doing right by people means never pissing them off. You have to be willing to piss people off. You have to be willing to do things in reaction to which those people may cry if you're going to be willing to do right by them. And in order to do right by them, you have to do right by you, right? And let them figure out how to sort out their emotional reactions to it. Maybe suggest they take awareness school. But I tell you, they won't do it. They won't. Because they don't want to change. They believe that if they just stay the same long enough, eventually the gravitational pull of their dysfunction will bring everybody into their orbit. And that's really the narcissistic core, I think. I want to be the center of my social, familial, interpersonal, universe. And I want the gravity. And the gravity consists of the emotional power. How fucking miserable can I make anybody who doesn't comply with me? That's the gravity. And I believe if I can just make everybody miserable enough, mother, father, sister, brother, daughter, in-laws, everybody revolves around me. If I just am enough of a fucking black hole of miserable, uncompromising, unbearable evil, I can get everything in my world just to revolve around me. And some little planet that could, some little planet goes, fuck this star system, man. There's a whole universe out there. I'm going to go over here, right? And that could be you. And it's a wonderful and a beautiful thing to do. You don't want to ask an evil person what's right to do. You don't want to ask a person who's under the influence of an evil fucking pattern whether or not doing the right thing is right. Don't ask their opinion. You don't ask the washing machine salesman if you ought to buy a washing machine from him. It's just not a good idea, right? That's a big part of what personal freedom is about.
I don't know if you addressed this, but people sometimes get stuck in feeling sorry for the trauma these people have often gone through. Obviously, they're playing the victim, but is there anything to add to that?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, because that is, I understand that feeling of, okay, well, I know that they're this way because they went through stuff. And it's like, I am the way I am because I went through stuff. But at some point, I had to put my awareness glasses on, my big girl pants on, and say, what am I going to do about it? And that's the thing is at some point, yes, there's reasons. There's always reasons. I mean, the people who have, committed the worst kind of crime and abuse, they've got reasons. And it makes sense that they did it given the context of what happened to them, but they never took personal responsibility and saw the harm that they were inflicting on someone else. And so that is, so yes, it makes sense. Yes, like we can feel and, have compassion for the trauma that a person, because I said that earlier in the video. It's like, yeah, it's not the person. There is no narcissistic person. There is a person who has adapted to their life by having to see and be and interact in certain ways where they can't be wrong and they can't be blamed, and because that was safest for them. And so we all, it's an adaptation. Everything's an adaptation to an environment, and so they had to adapt and become a certain way in order to survive in their environment, and that's why they are the way that they are. But at some point they have to see, a person in my world who I claim to love, my child, my spouse, my whoever, they are telling me that I'm treating them in a way that hurts them, and I am unwilling to see that. And there's always a confrontation where the person, they can't see it, but they're also unwilling to see it. And so that's where the responsibility lies, is in my willingness. Am I willing to see how evil and horrible I've been? And honestly, and this is, going back to earlier in the, within our relationship, I had to see how I was demeaning and low power. We're running out of time, guys. I had to see how I was being disrespectful and demeaning and ugly and critical. And I didn't want to see that. Of course I didn't want to. And that literally is the most painful thing, is to have that mirror, like somebody said, like have that mirror shown to you and said, these are the words. This is how I felt when you said it. What are you going to do about that? I had to be willing to say, shit, whoa, what? Like, it's crushing, it's crumbling. It is, just too humiliating. It's embarrassing. It's shameful. Like, when I'm really able to see how I've treated someone and for them to explain it to me in a way where I'm able to see it, it's just like, it's the most mortifying thing in the world. And no one wants to go through that mortification, that the trauma that I went through that caused me to adapt in such a way that I am now abusing the person I claim to love the most. Whoa, is that a pill to swallow? But in order to heal, in order to, kind of grow up and evolve, I have to be able to see that and all that it means without sinking so deep into the shame and guilt. And that's part of it too, because the whole self-devaluation is like, when I see how bad I've treated my partner, I would get shoulder pain, and that, because that's self-devaluation related to my partner. Oh, the guilt. Oh my God, I can't believe, how could I have been so horrible to you? How could I have blacked out in my interactions with you and gone so unconscious that I was able to say something so undermining and nasty and like just horrible to you? I have to own that. I have to see that without going so deep into self-devaluation, with knowing that I am, learning, and I have to have that grace with myself that you mentioned earlier. And so it's a lot, and there's a lot of layers to it. But yeah, so we have compassion for the trauma that led to the ugly adaptation that is the way that person is now. But at some point, they have to want the relationship. And again, that tunnel of honesty, it's like, this tunnel is always open. You can always come here, and I'm not going to kick you and shame you. Because that's a thing too. And we have this in one of our relationship podcasts, our relationship course, about just that. As soon as I see it, like he's not going to continue to make me feel bad about the bad thing that I did, because we're in this together and we're trying to actually grow and actually do something different. So there is grace, there is compassion, but there's also kind of a ruthless, like, your behavior is not in alignment with the person who actually wants to have peace, harmony, and goodwill, and good faith towards one another. Like, the way that you're behaving isn't working for me. That other person has to be willing to see it at some point.
Imagine a surgeon who was only willing to amputate a mutilated or frostbitten or gangrenous limb when there wasn't some trauma that would explain the fact that the limb was mutilated or frostbitten or gangrenous in some way. I'll only cut them off if there isn't some reason that the limb is that way. If there's a good reason that the limb became really distorted or destroyed or harmed or whatever, then I don't feel right about cutting it off, because it's not that limb's fault. It incurred a trauma. There is a point that's very practical in emergency surgery in Antarctica where even though it's not the foot's fault, there needs to be something done in order to preserve the life of the organism. You know what I mean? And I would say it like this way. Let's say my dad was in the mafia, and as a result of that, he murdered people, right? And it's really going to hurt his feelings if I'm not in the mafia. I gotta murder people, right? And I have a son, right? And I step back and I look at the logical consequences of this. Are we just going to keep kicking the can? And am I going to use compassion as an excuse to refrain from doing what I know is resourceful and what makes sense, and or as an excuse to continue to persist in doing what is unresourceful and what I know doesn't make sense? Am I willing to abuse the concept of compassion in order to have a little get out of jail free card? Oh, I'm glad I don't have to do that hard thing that makes sense. I'm glad that maybe the next generation will pick it up, right? I mean, I really think throughout eternity, these patterns just wait for somebody to do something about it. You have to be willing. Now, listen, it's kind of a tough shit situation, like you said. It's tough for a parent. They probably had a hard time. It's probably the way that they are. Guess what? Tough for them, tough for you. Tough for you to have them, tough for you to cut them off. Tough for them to have the childhood that they did. Tough, tough, tough. I bet they tell you tough, tough, tough. I bet they tell you life's not fair. I bet they tell you all sorts of things that are true that they forget to apply to their own life circumstances. My thing is, look, I'm not going to compromise my principles. I will not betray myself. Unless it's my mom. No, that is the end of the sentence. I will not betray myself. And a lot of this for me, I'm not giving you like hardline rules. You got to call people up tomorrow and be like, it's over. No, it's not about that at all. It's about, for me, building so much awareness in you that you become literally incapable of doing anything that doesn't make sense. And then what you do is you allow that incapability. And I mean, when I say doing anything that doesn't make sense, I mean, I can't take that bait. I just can't do what I normally do with what you just said. I can't do it anymore. I can't guilt myself into picking up the phone and calling you today. I can't guilt myself into picking up the phone when you're calling me, even though I don't want to talk to you, and even though I know where it's going to go. And even though I know you know that I don't want you to talk to me like that, and I also know that you're going to talk to me anyway. I'm not able in this instance to force myself to do what doesn't make sense right now. And you let that inability, that consciously cultivated inability to do what doesn't serve you, you let it grow and proliferate in your life and let it manifest in individual instances of interpersonal interaction. I don't believe in cutting people off because I think that's big, decisive, dramatic bullshit that just plays into the whole thing. I don't believe in being estranged from people, right? To me, it's like not talking to somebody, not interacting with them. That doesn't constitute estrangement. Estrangement is I don't talk to you, and that's on the record, and it's part of the drama fodder, and I think about you every day, and I constantly justify not talking to you, and I think about what you think about the fact that I don't talk about you, and I go, I bet she thinks it's my fault, and she hasn't thought about her part in it all. That's what being estranged is. I don't have time for that shit. I don't have time for any of that. For me, it's, listen, as I become more aware, I do less and less and less of what doesn't serve me and more of what does. And I'm real impersonal about how I apply that. I am like a clerk at the DMV. You come up and you hand me something, I look at it and I go, I'm sorry, sir, this isn't the right form. You got to come back with the other form. I'm sorry, sir, this address, we can't do it, right? Somebody comes and serves me some bullshit. I don't check to see if it's my mother, my uncle, my grandmother, some person from the internet, someone I've worked with, whether it's you. I don't check to see whether it's me. Somebody served me some bullshit and I say, oh, it's me. I just say, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't even look up from my desk to see who it is. I look at what's submitted and I go, no, I can't accept that.
Some bullshit.
No, I don't accept that. I don't, and what I mean by that is I don't ignore a person, like literally someone who's trying to talk to me. I mean, I don't allow myself to get sucked into the game playing, to that whole thing that goes, well, I know I'm not being totally reasonable here, but I'm going to really hurt my feelings if you don't go along with me a little bit. Hey, I conceded a little bit to you, and I let you have that one, so now you're obligated to let me have one, even if you don't. No, not going to do that. No, I'm just not going to do that. There's just so many things that you can do in life. When you build up inside you, you've got this, it's like a, what is it like? This pattern dispatcher. It's like this big dragon inside, and it's a loving dragon. It's a kind. It's like Puff the Magic Dragon, everybody's friend, right? But it doesn't put up with any bullshit. And the moment the bullshit comes in, the fire comes out, and it just consumes that pattern, and it just goes. You have encountered people like this in your life. For me, it was like a PE teacher, right? There are certain people that you don't want to fuck with. I know Miss Parrish is not going to put up with any of my nonsense. No trifling behavior will be accepted, and there might be a penalty incurred for exhibiting it, right? Children recognize this among adults, and they're not afraid of them. Very often they love them, and they respect them quite a bit and enjoy being around them. Why not you become that person? Why not you become that person that all these people who are out here playing all these con games and trying to get shit over on everybody, and maybe I can milk you for a little concession, and I can milk you for a little guilt, and I can get a little something out of you. Just become that brick wall that's not fun to punch. You ever try to milk a brick wall? It's not productive, right? And so when you try to come and get some bullshit over on me, you're not going to have success. Go next door, right? Like, That's a wonderful thing to be. That's not mean. That's not mean. It's not cruel. It's not unkind. It's actually the height of kindness. It is courageous kindness because it invites that person to look at their strategy and go, Jesus, I don't think this is the best. Narcissistic people deserve a better role than that which they play in the lives of their victims. No, a lot of these people have the potential to be wonderful people, I think. They could be really fucking cool people, right? But they haven't fixed their dysfunctions in large part because nobody cares about them enough, or nobody cares about themselves enough to take a definitive stand and accept 0% of their bullshit. And so their strategy kind of works. And so it's kind of rational that they're still kind of doing it all the time. And so they've never really had that firm rebuff that gave them an opportunity to go, oof, that kind of hurt. Maybe I should change something about the way I approach that wall next time. Maybe I should, right? I think they deserve that opportunity. And I extend that opportunity to them by saying to myself, what do I deserve? I don't deserve to, I'm aware, so now I get to go and I get to round up all the narcissists and force my perspective on them. No. But I do get to make a conscious choice about how I decide to react to other people's behavior and whether I'm going to continue interacting with those people. I do get to decide that. I'm not going to force my perspective or experience on anybody, right? Much less someone I don't even know. But you know what I can do? I can use my perspective and my experience as a guide for my behavior and my choices. And I don't have to let someone else's capacity to misunderstand that or to create a bad feeling in themselves as a result of it undermine my confidence in my decision-making process. I don't have to do that. And once I learn I don't have to do that, I get to practice not doing that. And once I start practicing not doing that, I'm free. And very often, you want to spare those people your resentment of them. Another person's resentment is a horrible burden for someone to have to bear. And every time I think you give in to these people, you add to that psychic, spiritual, energetic, I don't know what it is, burden. Yes. They know at some level that you hate their guts, or that a part of you does, and that a part of you just wishes that it could get away. And the good part of them inside, underneath all those patterns, that part suffers because of that burden. It feels that, right? And it is pained by that. And a lot of their nasty behavior, I think, is a manifestation of that pain. So how do you do if you care about them and you feel bad about that trauma and stuff? I'm not going to do anything that's going to contribute to my ability to feel resentment towards you. And I'm going to do that to spare you the psychic burden of that resentment. Now, that might never get a thank you from you. I don't need a thank you from you. You always want to have this. Especially some of you people are afflicted with selflessness. And it's like a computer worm in your brain, and it just turns over and it just fucks everything up. And every time you're making sense, you go, okay, yeah, makes sense. And it goes, but what about them and all this? And it just is so powerful for you. It's like a siren song, and you know it's the rocks, and you know you're going to crash your ship of resourceful change into it and sink and die. But something about you is so entranced by it, you can't help it. So what you always have to do is you want to take the idea about how you have a right to stand up for yourself and look out for yourself, and about how that's good enough. You don't need anything beyond that. And then you want to go, and it's like I seen on TV, but wait, there's more. You're actually doing right by the other person too, at a level they've probably never even considered before. And so when it's, like not beating yourself up for having yelled at your kids or whatever, you want to go, listen, you're going to change more effectively if you're nice to yourself. If you're nice to yourself, you're going to become more who you want to be. And the nicer you are to yourself, the less stressed out you are, the less likely you are to subject your kids to all that stressed out tension and things. So you take your selfishness, not in a negative sense, but your self-orientation, and you start playing with that idea that in and of itself is enough, and you want to staple onto it. And even if it weren't enough, it's still the pathway by which I'm going to do the best job of actively, practically, functionally serving other people.
Wow. Okay. Well, we are coming up on 2 hours. Apparently Instagram doesn't cut you off, because here we are.
Good to know. You got to know how far you can push.
That's true. So yeah, this is kind of what we do, is we take a topic, we take an issue, we take stuff that people have going on, and we go deep. We go deep, deep, deep. Steve unravels so many layers of it, helps you to see things in a way that just is like, yes, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And I feel so much more free and so much more light and so much more able to make sense out of doing what works. And that's really our philosophy. It's like, we are all about helping you improve what it's like to be you. What is the experience of you like? How can it be a little better? How can you be more free, more aware, more able to interact in ways that feel good. We talk about really every layer of your life gets addressed in Awareness School. The meetings are about this long. They're about 2 hours, 3.5 hours of, ongoing engagement with the people who show up and really want to go deep. We go as deep as you want to go.
And there's a Telegram group too.
Yes, and there's a Telegram group where really there's all throughout the week. So really 10 solid weeks of assistance and help and amazing videos from the Ever Better Life course that will just help to create this organization framework structure in your mind for understanding yourself. There's implementation and tools. So it's a very expansive and in-depth program. Some people have mentioned the cost, or if they're not able to do it. This is something we offer multiple times throughout the year. And if it's something you want to do, save up for it, because it really is. We price it as we do because we really put so much into it, and we love the service that we're able to provide and the cost feels good to us because it's an investment in yourself. And people who get the information, we've had people get the information for free back in previous years, and you value it more when you pay for it. Just so a little note on what it's like to make a big investment. A lot of people haven't made big investments in themselves for something that's oh, this is just for my personal growth. It's not like my rent. And making this investment in yourself, it's a big step, and it feels, when you do it and when you apply the material that you learn, really this material gives back to you. We intend for people who sign up for this program for the cost of it to be for you to make back 10 times that, because of the growth and the expansion that you experience as a result of being in the program. So that's our intention for you when you sign up to be in Awareness School.
And if you're not able to enroll, if you don't want to enroll right now, I'm posting stuff like this in my stories all the time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I tell is that if you can't get in the course right now, and you're not all over the free material, and send me a message, ask a question. Listen, here's my situation. I like this idea. I don't see how it applies to my situation. I will assist you in doing that if you ask me to. If you think that you're going to take advantage of material just because you paid some money for it, you're not. Yeah, like it is good to invest in yourself and stuff, but if you are not taking advantage of the free stuff that we put out, especially, I know that you put a lot of stuff, but I publish books in my stories for some reason. I don't know, something wrong with me. But anyway, a lot of stuff's out there, right? And a lot of people believe, okay, well, I'm not getting the full story, so there's no sense in doing anything yet. I'm going to wait till I can enroll in the course. You'll get so much more out of the course if you take advantage of the free stuff that's available. Just start now. Just start doing something. When you don't feel ready and you don't have the full picture and you don't do it. If you need to ask me a question. Something about something specific, right? If you need an exercise, ask me. I'll give you an exercise. All that stuff. Don't use not being able to get into the course as an excuse. But you have to start becoming resourceful. You really have to start becoming resourceful. And I wonder about people sometimes who, and it's not even like there's something wrong with them. That's a problem we got to fix, because if you're real passive in your relationship to information and you get into a course, you'll be passive in relationship to that too, unless you become active in your relationship to that information. And so kind of be honest with yourself there and say, am I taking maximum advantage of the resources that are available to me for free? And if not, guess what? Don't feel bad about it. You just go, wow, that's a little pattern, a little tendency I have. We really. Something happened?
We're just running low on battery.
10%. We got
Almost.
plenty. So just assume that you're perfectly positioned, right? And don't assume that you've got two options: staying where you are or enrolling in Awareness School this time. That's not true. It's a great option for people who are ready for it, and there are people here who are ready. I will also say there's probably some people here who are watching this video who aren't going to sign up for it, and they're not going to sign up for it for bad reasons, because they think it's not worth it, or they're not worth it, or they're not going to do the stupid crap like that. That's bad too. So we've got people for whom it's going to be right eventually, right? You don't need to feel bad about not being able to take it now. Help me, let me know how I can help you make the use of your time in the meantime. We've also got people, you need to take this course, right? There's no pressing reason for you to not take this course, except for you don't value yourself, or you don't think your mother would approve of you taking it, right? You need to take the course. If you like this, if this resonates with you, if it makes sense to you, if you can feel the parts that are traditionally resistant to change, finding it difficult to not understand exactly how this stuff applies to your life, then this is for you, right? But don't be complacent, don't be passive, be active. Assume that there is a path forward into the future to get to what you want, and just be resourceful in what you're dealing with, right? And use what's available to you now to get access to perhaps what's not available to you yet. And then when you get that, you'll have this wonderful track record of resourceful utilization. that will make it so you're even better positioned to make use of that stuff too. So
good. Yeah. So it's we start on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific is when the meetings are live. There's recordings of all of the videos, 10 weeks long. All the other details, if you click the link in my bio, I'll post a link to it too on the other video. You'll be able to see more about it and watch the testimonial videos of people who have taken it. And
is that a Terminator comment?
Yes, it is.
Nice. I was hoping I was going to get a Terminator comment. Right.
Awesome. So we're going to end it here, and let us know if you have any other questions. We'll go live a couple other times in the next 2 weeks. So thank you guys for being
Thanks
here.
a lot.
Bye.